And so our worship and our work together continues, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Deborah Lewer. I met Debbie back in, do you remember when? November
2022.
Where?
Here.
Right here at the Diocese of Blackburn conference. Debbie is senior lecturer in the history of art at the University of Glasgow. She's a specialist in 20th century German art and in the rich relationship between art and theology. Debbie's known as an historian of the radical Dada movement. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Oh, good. I need my translation app. Which started as a protest of the First World War, tackling attitudes thought to be taboo, offensive, even childish, and in particular for innovative approaches to research. Debbie also works extensively as a speaker and a writer for churches and cathedrals, ecumenical groups of clergy, ordinands, retreatants, festival goers, and offers to explore visual art from faith perspectives. And so I invite you now to continue in an attitude of prayer in that Quaker tradition that all meetings are worship, and this is prayer, as Debbie leads us into the first of the series of Ways of Seeing. Debbie, thank you.
Thank you, Anton, for that lovely introduction. Good morning, everyone. I'm an art historian, and I am delighted to be here to share some brief reflections on ways of seeing, on art, and on difference. This morning, as we open up the idea of a priesthood of all believers, let's take a look at this painting. It's by the most brilliant painter of the Spanish Golden Age, Diego Velázquez, from the early 17th century. What do we see? A plainly dressed woman is at work in a kitchen. She stands at a table with vessels, a cloth, a pestle and mortar, and a bulb of garlic. She's been preparing a meal, most likely. But there's something else about her. Her posture, her expression, and the slight tilt of her head suggests that something, somewhere, has caught her attention. As we look, we too become aware of another table, other figures, just glimpsed through an opening behind her. We see what her eyes do not. We see through to Jesus at the table, haloed. We see his hand raised to bless the bread. We see a moment of dawning realization for his companions at the table. In art historical terms, this painting sits within two traditions. One is of the Spanish bodegón, that is, paintings of simple pantry items, food and utensils, beautifully and dramatically lit, much prized by collectors of the age. The other is the fashion, at the time, from the Netherlands, of including a religious scene, like this one, in a busy kitchen, with another supper at Emmaus staged for us with a curtain drawn back to present its moral message, meant as a spiritual contrast to the material world and appetites of the foreground. Or like this extraordinary image of meaty excess, through which there is a little contrasting scene in the distance of the flight into Egypt, with Mary, the mother of Jesus, giving alms to the poor. But if we look carefully, we see that Velázquez does much more than this. He does something radically different. His woman, this kitchen maid, is no mere bit part in the material of the foreground. She is connected to that other table. She breaks from quotidian concerns. She registers. She responds without looking. something resonates for her. Velázquez's painting is, I think, profoundly about seeing and believing, about hearing, evidence, and resonance. For a painting so concerned with what is seen and unseen, it's an irony that for a long time, the supper at Emmaus in this painting was in fact obliterated, probably when fashionable taste once again preferred a pantry scene untroubled by theology. This was its state until 1933, when restorers uncovered, literally revealed the decisive scene. Finally, there is the question of this woman herself, this kitchen maid. For generations, Velázquez's famous painting was simply known as La Mulata, and sometimes it still is now. The term was used to designate a person of mixed race, derived from the word for a mule, a working animal bred by mixing a horse with a donkey. In the city of Seville, in the early 1600s, an estimated 25% of the population, that is 30,000 people, were enslaved. We cannot know who this woman was, or the circumstances of her parentage, or what Velázquez intended to show us by staging her front and center. But it is she, very likely owned, without liberty, her status for viewers little more than part of the household inventory. It is she who the artist shows us hears, she who senses, she who knows, who believes even, without seeing. What is happening out with her place in this household, yet resonates within her uniquely. So to finish, a brilliant response to this painting was made recently during the pandemic. Working with what he could find at home, the British baritone opera singer Peter Braithwaite created a photo series, which has now become a major work of art in its own right, called Rediscovering Black Portraiture. Here is his kitchen maid with the supper at Emmaus. As his homage plays with past and present, work and home, male and female, subject and object, he also dramatizes the senses of hearing and of seeing that are so resonant in this work. How fitting for this musician that God's revelation in the breaking of bread at that moment of recognition at Emmaus is here signified by sound, by resonance, by art, a musical score by Bach, no less. Can you see that in the upper background? There's a blue book, it's a musical score of Bach. I hope that all we have just seen might help us to think about the vital place of human uniqueness in resonating God. I think it can help us to open our eyes to our own priesthood and that of others, overlooked, unseen, and yet perhaps absolutely central to God's purposes for and with us, whoever we are. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to be here again. So, now for something completely different. Take a look at this. What do you see? It's an oil painting of a moderately attractive landscape. There's water, a lake perhaps. There's blue sky, green foliage, a hint of autumnal gold. There's a group of figures, some wild animals, and some kind of historical person too. It's of a medium size. It's not very remarkable. It's perfectly inoffensive, and it would probably blend in many a living room, or indeed a Christian conference centre corridor. Why are we looking at this while thinking about difference and unity? And how is this unremarkable picture relevant to our topic this morning of artificial intelligence and the church? Well, this innocuous landscape is not quite what it seems. It's the work of two Russian dissident conceptual artists. They work as a pair and are called Melamid and Komar. They grew up in Moscow, experiencing the last of Stalinist totalitarianism before emigrating in the 1970s via Israel to the US. Much of their work comments on the dominant, official, state-approved artworks and monuments of the Soviet Union. Sometime after the collapse of communism in Russia, they made a series of paintings, of which this is just one. I will tell you how it was made. The artists employed a professional market survey company to conduct a questionnaire of a random sample of 1,001 ordinary Americans from a range of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, ages, genders, religious beliefs, political loyalties, socioeconomic circumstances, education levels, and so on. The survey was conducted by a 24-minute telephone conversation in which people were asked questions about their preferences when it comes to art. They were asked about their favourite colours. Blue came out top, followed by green. Did they like sharp angles or soft curves? They were asked whether they liked abstract painting or more recognisable scenes. Did they prefer indoor or outdoor scenes? Most people said they liked natural landscapes. Did they like their art to deal with religious themes? Well, only 20% said yes. They were asked if they wanted to see water in a painting, trees, people, and animals. They were asked if they preferred any figures to be ordinary people or historical personages such as, quote, Lincoln or Jesus. They were asked what kind of size they would like an artwork to be. From a range of possible answers, the most popular size was that of a, quote, 19-inch television screen. You can probably see where this is going. The painting we are looking at is America's Most Wanted painting. It is the carefully produced result of all the survey responses applied proportionately to its making. The proportion of colours we see, the subject matter, even the kinds of brushstrokes have all been derived from a systematically defined consensus. 1,001 people is the recognised standard minimum number for an effective survey. So this artwork is created by a kind of algorithm, a form of AI perhaps, before it existed as such. It's also perhaps the closest thing we might ever see to a large and, let's face it, utterly absurd attempt at a collective work of agreement. Melamid and Komar's painting tells us, playfully, something about what happens when a sterile consensus trumps variety and difference, when values are swiftly, automatically settled on, and when a shared language, generated by metrics or by an intelligence that is artificial, silences unique human voices, individuality, and the energy of human creativity. It's a project that makes me laugh. It also makes me wonder about human beings' God-given ingenuity. how different cultures can flourish, expressing themselves in different modes, working to relate to one another and learn from one another, rather than speaking in an easy monotone. It makes me think about how this picture is not just bland, but ultimately totalitarian. So, looking at it here today, in this wonderfully diverse forum, I wonder if this absurd little picture might help us. It might help us not just to listen, but to question hasty, easy consensus. Seeing its opposite, the real diversity of God's creation, it might bring us, perhaps, a little bit closer to heaven than any algorithm can ever take us. Thank you. This morning, we are remembering that it is 1700 years since the First Ecumenical Council convened at Nicaea, that pivotal meeting of churches, Eastern and Western, that I've learned, incidentally, was about the same size as our forum here. I thought for some time about an artwork that could somehow speak to this ancient and ongoing spirit of ecumenism, one that might convey a sense of dialogue, of East and West, and of the shared work of new commitment, hope, and faith in and with difference. I thought I'd have to find quite a weighty, worthy work of art to do all that. And then, one day, as I was preparing to take some students to visit the Scottish National Gallery of Modern Art down the road from us, in a little village called Edinburgh, I was reminded of this small work in the collection there. It's by a pioneering artist of the early 20th century, Russian avant-garde, Natalia Goncharova. It's a collage made using a vibrant mix of gouache paint, pasted papers, and metallic foils. What we see is in fact a costume design for a modern ballet that was then being planned by the great impresario of the Ballet Russe, Sergei Diaghilev. It's important, I think, to note the date. This was in 1915, in the middle of the carnage of a terrible, long, and bloody war that was steadily wiping out a generation of young men in particular. Diaghilev was planning his ballet in Switzerland, and Goncharova left Russia, traveling there to join him and the many other dissident artists who worked and protested against the war from that neutral territory there. The ballet was to have been called La Liturgie, the liturgy. It would have been performed in Lausanne and maybe in Paris, but its roots and inspiration were in Slavic Orthodox liturgical traditions and in the life and passion of Jesus. This costume design was just one of many Goncharova made for the dancers, and they are stunning. This was for one of the three kings, the Magi who travelled from the east, bearing gifts, to kneel beneath a star before the Christ child. The ballet was never realised, but it would have been an extraordinary collaboration with radical choreography and with music by no less than Igor Stravinsky. Goncharova envisaged sets for the ballet too, including this, a version of an iconostasis. Like many modern artists of her era, Goncharova was a bohemian, something of a rebel, who lived an unconventional, defiant life. She was in every sense a citizen of modernity, but she was also profoundly attuned to the orthodox traditions of her homeland, of medieval manuscript illumination, icons, and more. Before leaving Russia, she'd worked in an artistic environment where others were experimenting with new media, new materials. Goncharova's king glitters with gold and silver, suggestive of his royalty, his gifts, and the holiness signified by gold in liturgical spaces. There is something like grim determination, I think, on his face, but there's also tremendous exuberance. Goncharova's leaping king is one of the jazziest Christendom has ever seen, I'm sure. And we can only imagine what the liturgy of the young dancers of that imperiled generation telling this story would have been like. And what strikes me most is precisely that leaping, that image of the pilgrim bounding towards God. I'm struck that Matthew's Gospel tells us that when the wise men saw that the star had stopped over the place where the child was, they were overwhelmed with joy. It's very different to some of the Western Renaissance images of the Magi, arrived in reverent adoration, like this one, for example, wonderful though it is, with the detail of the king's crowns being removed and laid aside before Christ. Goncharova's leaping king, provisional, unrealized, experimental, scrappy even, reads for me today like a suggestion or an invitation. As we think of Nicaea 1700 years ago, and of our world at war in so many places now, it might remind us of connection with shared traditions, of the value of collaboration, of hope for a bold, vibrant future, intuited through faith. In the face of those warring powers tearing bodies, lives, and communities apart, this leaping, dancing, tinfoil king is also a figure of earnest, defiant joy, and surely we can all share in that, wherever we come from. Hello again. As this is our final session, I'd just really like to thank Anton, Dorrel, and all the team who have brought such hard work and creative thinking to this forum, and from me for making a space for art within it. As we consider our theme this morning of the pursuit of unity, I'd like you to have a think about what the British artist Cornelia Parker might be describing here. She says, "Where you store things you cannot quite throw away. Like the attic, it's a place where toys, dolls, outgrown clothes, and records tend to congregate." She's talking about a garden shed, like this one. It's a very ordinary shed that the artist acquired in the early 1900s, but it became the material for an extraordinary work of art. Following what so many of us tend to do with such spaces, Parker went out and collected old, everyday objects, people's unwanted stuff, gathering it up from jumble sales, charity shops, and the like. She then put it all into the shed. Then, with the help of the British Army, she arranged to detonate a powerful explosion, blowing to smithereens the shed and its contents. Don't try this at home. I expect it was one of the Army's more unusual missions. The dynamite blew apart everything. What is more remarkable is what she did next. Gathering up the charred remains from the destruction, she raised them up, suspending them on fine, clear threads in the gallery. And finally, to complete the work, she lit the whole thing from inside with a single light bulb. Transformed, the broken matter is no longer earthbound, but every wounded shard plays its part in the light and the darkness that makes this work. Parker noticed something. She said, as the objects were suspended one by one, they began to lose their aura of death and appeared reanimated in limbo. The light on inside the installation created huge shadows on the wall, so the shed looked like it was re-exploding, or perhaps coming back together again. I think, too, of this installation's subtitle. It is an exploded view. The artist wasn't only thinking about the shattering violence of the explosion. She also took her inspiration from those technical diagrams that explain how something made of many components works, like a car engine, say. They show the dismembered parts, revealing that a lot more goes into making something function than meets the eye. Such diagrams, these exploded views, also help to tell us how to repair something or how to diagnose a fault. It gives us a new view. It's not a senseless scattering, but more a way to elucid new knowledge of something never seen in such a way before. The exploded view dismembers, yes, but it also brings new insight, new potential. So for me, this work of art is an explosion in both senses. It's catastrophic, disorienting, destructive, like a curtain torn in two. But at the same time, in breaking things open, it reveals them, a bit like those geeky little diagrams, but a lot more exciting. Perhaps looking at this ordinary yet extraordinary shed, we might gain an exploded view of what real unity can mean for us. Seeing and breaking open our habits, our closed groups, our tight networks, our closed minds. In the play of light and dark, in the very real shocks to our common life, in the mess that is sometimes church, things blown apart, the seeming wastedness of it all, we might yet see God undoing and redoing creation all the time. Something the great writer Annie Dillard said in a beautiful book, The Abundance, resonates for me here. She wrote, "The gaps are the thing. The gaps are the spirit's one home. The altitudes and latitudes so dazzlingly spare and clean that the spirit can discover itself for the first time like a once blind man unbound." I'm sure I'm not the only one who has found that an ecumenical gathering like this one can raise all sorts of questions about the things or beliefs in our lives that might benefit from the shock of some conceptual dynamite. We might ask ourselves into what crevices a light should be shone. From what do we need to be unbound? And as we travel away from here, do we only need to look up, searching the expanse of heaven like the Magi to perceive where God is? Or might the little light that is right in the middle of our mess, our junk, shadows and brokenness remind us that God is right with us and that all things can be made new. Thank you.